You're listening to the Forum Podcast, a production of Calvin Theological Seminary. For nearly 150 years, Calvin Seminary has been a thought leader in Reformed faith and scholarship. We invite you to join us and our guests as we wrestle with the questions of mercy, justice, faith, and formation. We do not have all the answers, but we believe how we pursue them matters. This is the Forum Podcast.
What does it mean to die well and to live with the end in mind? In this episode, Dr. Mary Vanden Berg, Professor Emerita of Systematic Theology at Calvin Theological Seminary, joins Aaron Einfeld, Director of Lifelong Learning at Calvin Theological Seminary, to talk about death, suffering, grief, and the quiet hope at the heart of Christian formation. From lament and finitude to the theology of funerals, this is a conversation about embracing our limits and trusting the God who holds us through them all.
So today, my guest is Professor Mary Vanden Berg. She is a professor of systematic theology here at Calvin Seminary. And we are going to be talking about the topic of death, suffering, and Christian funerals. And I am very excited to talk to you today, Mary, about these three topics.
Are you really?
Yeah, I am. So one of the reasons why I am excited to talk about death today, and I'm actually excited, Mary, is because, the topic of this podcast is all about lifelong learning, kind of the big transformative things that happen to us as humans and as Christians. And we're comfortable talking about discipleship and about how when you get married, things change. When you have parents, there's all these markers in life. There's even, psychologists have stages of adult development that we go through, and there's really things that prompt that. And so we talk a lot about all these things as we're like growing. Yeah. No one's like, oh yeah, but as you grow, some of those leaves start getting really crusty on the branch. And so I'm excited that you're here because we're going to talk about even to the end. Yeah. At times where people are losing their strength, whether it's over time or whether it's immediate, God still has something for us. Yeah. In death, and in suffering, and in grief. And so we're going to talk about what happens at death. So you're a systematic theology professor, but you've started teaching a course, which is the title and topic of this podcast. How did you get into that? Because death, if you want to take the energy out of a room, just say, I talk about death all the time, right? So how did you get into teaching about death, suffering, and funerals?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think, so I study theological anthropology, which is the doctrine of humanity. So that's sort of my specialty area. Mm-hmm. So I thought quite a bit about humans in general and our relationship to God. And then on top of that, humans as the image of God. Mm-hmm. And you can't talk about humans without talking about humans as finite.
Right.
And so talking about humans as finite means that we have an end. Means that we have boundaries around us. And one of those boundaries or ends is our human life on earth end, and that we call death. Mm-hmm. So we're mortal. That's one way to put it, but people don't really talk about that either. Finitude, I don't think most people understand. It's just a word you throw around and nobody knows what it means really. Mm-hmm. But I just started thinking about death and how that might impact what we do, how we live. Part of the basic rhythm of the Christian life that I talk about in my systematics class is dying and rising. So there's this rhythm of dying and rising that's part of life of a Christian. And so how does that all fit together? And I was very fortunate, I guess, in some ways. A colleague of mine who works at a different seminary, his name is J. Todd Billings, and he finally wrote a book. He himself is has cancer, terminal cancer, and he wrote a book called The End of the Christian Life. The subtitle is intriguing: How Embracing Our Mortality Frees Us to Truly Live. That's pretty cool,
That's
right?
powerful.
Right. And so then I've read a number of books on dying already. And one thing that starts, it's like books on sin. There's two things you can see. A book on sin will always start with everybody denies sin.
Mm-hmm.
I don't care if you look at a book in the 18th century or the 20th century, people deny sin. Something interesting in readings on death is that you won't find that as often in earlier centuries, but in the more recent 50, 60 years or so, it's fairly well known that nobody talks about death. Humans deny it. In the West, I should make that clear, not everywhere, but in the West, humans just deny death.
Which we were kind of joking a little bit about. Are you sure you want to talk about death?
I
Like,
did.
We don't talk about death very
don't,
often.
do we? No.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm really intrigued by that title, the Embracing Our Mortality to Truly Live. Like, how does that work?
Yeah, so I think part of what Billings is talking about there, and I sort of have my own interpretations as well, but that if you live as if you're not dying, what does that look like? And the fact of the matter is, from the day you're born, death is in the picture.
Mm-hmm.
The only way you wouldn't die is should Christ return, and then we'll all be basically translated immediately into our resurrection bodies. The dead in Christ will rise first, as Paul says, and then the rest of us will be changed. So I think that what Billings is getting at there, and I know I'm never quite sure anymore. I've read him so much that what's my thought and what's his. So I want to kind of give him credit, but also realize that, well, maybe he didn't
freely,
say that.
Right? Yeah, I know.
So
he's going to call into the podcast.
Yeah, hopefully not. But I think the basic idea is the fact of the matter is you are dying, basically from the day you're born, because it could happen anytime. And at a certain point, you actually are moving more toward that. And I think I'll just say part of what even gave me pause to think about it, and is as I started reading these things, I myself was getting older. So I was probably in my late 50s when I started reading about some of this. I'm now in my mid-60s, and I still know people who are my age. I know people 20 years older than me who still act as if they're not going to die.
No, never.
And it's like, are you crazy? So I'm actually looking at it and going, hey, this really is my future. And that future might be, if you look at average age of death, it might be sooner than I think.
Yeah.
You know, so how does that impact how I live? And how should it have impacted how I lived my whole life?
You have a friend who says that you die the way you live.
I think that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, when you talk about an author who writes about death, who has terminal illness, that gives my sense of, I'm ready to listen.
Yeah.
They got a lot of authority. What are they going to say? But in some sense, we all could have that same authority if we paid attention to it, our own finitude. What do we miss when we pretend or don't look at or don't face just this concept of, like, we're all going to die someday? What do we miss? What do we miss out on?
Well, I wonder. That's a good question, Aaron. I haven't probably thought through that specific, which is really a practical question too. I think some of it might be that we miss opportunities to serve.
Okay.
Right? If dying is just part of life, why are we always so worried about doing things that God might be asking us to do that might cause suffering, might endanger us in one way or another? So that might be part of it. But I also think that it's this reality of who's in control. I really think that's the larger part of the question is if you recognize that you are mortal, well, then someone's in charge and it's not you, at least for Christians.
Right.
I think most of us in the West, because we do have so much control over everything in life, where we live, what we eat, how we get somewhere, think about anything in your life. What don't you have control over? You even have fairly good control over the people around you for the most part, right? You can say something and they'll listen, might argue a little bit, think you're kids, maybe your wife, you know, but you have some people think they have a lot of control, right? But most people think they have a fair amount of control. One of the things that opened my eyes to this lack of control is the Puritans. And the Puritans thought that sleeping was practice for death.
Okay. Well, I really like to sleep, Mary. So,
well, you know, so good
what
practice.
does that mean about me?
Well, there's an ancient Jewish prayer, and I actually really love it. And it goes something like this. It's from the Psalms. Father, Jesus said it from the cross.
Okay.
Father, into your hands I commit my spirit, for you have redeemed me, O Lord, O God of truth. Keep me as the apple of your eye, and hide me under the shadow of your wings, and wake me with the morning light to serve thee again. So, what are you doing when you go to sleep if you listen to that prayer? You're actively committing yourself into the hands of God. Well, the fact of the matter is you're in the hands of God every day.
Yes, right.
But most of us don't think that way. And unless we are very intentional in how we wake up in the morning, for example, you're going to get up, you're going to do the things you always do, you're going to go through all your rituals, you're going to go to work, you're going to, you know, et cetera, but are you in control?
Yeah.
And so what does it look like to sort of actively submit to God on a daily basis, not just in your sanctification, dying and rising, but in everything you do? What does that look like? What difference does that make in your life when you say to yourself, I don't know what's going to happen today, but God knows, and He's in control. So I'm going to commit my life to Him right now and follow where He leads today.
It's almost like it's if I'm going to use a strong word, if it's like delusional to pretend we're not dying.
I think that's right.
Then, and I'm guilty as anybody probably, it's almost like that act, that rhythm of that prayer is like, it brings focus and clarity.
Yes.
So, you know, you have a terminal illness. All of a sudden, things become crystal clear about your finitude, and what matters is like, boom, right there.
Yeah.
So I'm just thinking about the question of maybe what we miss, it sounds like, is we miss that like focus and clarity and soberness of what we could do each day. And that prayer almost like helps us in this pattern of formation to really say, don't pretend.
Right. Well, and again, I think the most important point is really that you don't pretend that you're in control, because you're not. That's part of finitude. You have limits. God does not. Some of the limits imposed on you are imposed by God through His Word, but you are limited. You can't. I mean, even parents telling their children, "You can do anything you want. You can be anything you want." It's like, what a lie. They can't.
They can do some things,
they
right?
They can do some things,
right?
but you can't either,
Right.
and neither can I. And as you get older, you do start to realize that, because these crazy things like 60 is the new 40. Let me tell you, my body did not feel like this at 40, and that is just a big lie. You can think it if you want, but it's not true. But what was true, or what is true, is that day to day, every day, God is in control of my life, and I think some of those prayers, you maybe know this one. We talked about this in class this year. Some kids, myself included, grew up with, "Now I lay me down to sleep. Pray the Lord my soul to keep." People have changed it. They say now, "Guide me safely through the night."
It's about safety,
but,
right?
But the prayer originally was, "Now I lay me down to sleep. I pray the Lord my soul to keep. If I should die before I wake, I pray thee, Lord, my soul to take. If I should live for other days, I pray the Lord to guide my ways." Why did we take that line out? It's a realization of who's in control. You are not.
Which maybe I haven't read the book. Maybe I should now that you've referenced. But maybe another thing is that there's all this energy we spend trying to control things.
We do.
Trying to slow the aging process, trying to slow what it looks like, trying to control so many things in our lives that maybe if we were actually be to free up a lot of energy to be more present,
right,
in our day-to-day relationships.
Yeah, I forget the millions of dollars that people spend cosmetically
Sure.
to try to make themselves look younger.
Right.
And I was like, Okay, that's a temporary solution. You realize that, right?
No, there's probably, right? There's probably as we think about, our lifelong development and the 20-year-old saying that prayer of practicing dying, even if they're saying the same words, it's going to have a different resonance than someone in their 70s.
It is.
Right?
But why? Why should an old person say somebody who's 85, not that well, probably realizes they're not going to live much longer? Why should they pray that prayer, say the into thy hands I commit my spirit prayer, any more than somebody who's 10?
Right.
That child, that father, that whatever, those people, at the end of the day, you don't know what's going to happen today. You might be young, but and this sounds so morbid. I know people.
It's on death. We're talking death, Mary. It can be morbid.
People go crazy.
Yeah.
It's like literally, you don't know what's going to happen
Right.
today. You could drive to work and you could be in a car accident, and that could be the end. You don't know that your heart's not going to stop for some inexplicable reason. And I think that's also part of it, Aaron, is that by the time you get to my age, you've pretty well, at least I have, seen about as many awful things as I wish. I mean, I'm not in war, obviously, but just in normal life. And to deny that those things could happen at any time to anyone seems utterly foolish to me.
I just wonder if people, and again, I'm talking about all of us, right? Maybe then when something bad happens, it's more surprising or jarring because it's not what we expect.
I think that's right. I do think that's right, Aaron, yeah.
Of course, it's terrible if we expect it, too.
Right.
But
you shouldn't walk around, like with I think my husband sometimes thinks I do, but I don't. I shouldn't walk around with a cloud over my head. Although he did forbid me from saying that prayer, like when he's in bed with me, he's like, I do not want to think about dying. This is not practice for death. I'm like, whatever.
You can agree to disagree.
Yeah,
though.
that's right. It's okay. You should be reminded.
Yeah, right.
But yeah, I do think that some, especially what I'll call unexpected deaths, because they are unexpected. We don't expect children to die.
Of course.
I had a nephew, their little child, 3 months old, died this past fall. It was horrendous.
It's terrible.
Out of nowhere, just boom. Little guy's heart stopped, and that was it. And yeah, it was a really horrible situation. And we all would say babies shouldn't die. Well, that is absolutely true. It's actually true that none of us should. That wasn't God's intention from the beginning. His intention was that we would live with him, and we pretty much messed that up. But that doesn't mean the jarring nature of a young person. I mean, Billings is, I think when he was diagnosed, he was about in his early 40s. He's probably around 50 now. I don't know his age. But just to say, nobody wants somebody that's 40 to die. It's just young. There's a certain age at which we're like, well, they were 80. It's like okay. Although people are still going to miss that person. But to your point, I think it is important not to minimize the grief, particularly when there's the death of someone who we'll just say died too soon, right?
Yeah.
And that could be. I think that in our own minds, that age probably even changes with age. So if one of my friends dies, I guess it still feels a little too soon to me, but not like if a child dies. That just seems like a horror that's almost unimaginable. And I'm not saying that we should in any way get used to that. I don't think we get used to death. I just think we should have a better awareness of death, because I do think it can help us to live in a way that's more faithful to who God is and who we are in relationship to him.
So let's talk about suffering now. It gets even better. Death. Now we're going to talk about suffering.
Yay.
There's a lot of money spent on avoiding pain, right? I mean, the whole it's pains and gains when you're
Yeah.
from a business strategy, you're trying to
Yeah.
relieve someone's pain.
Yeah.
Yeah. What are some of the main points you make in your class about suffering?
Yeah.
I mean, this is a huge topic, but
Yeah.
where should we get started on this part?
So we don't talk about the problem of evil. I'll say that
Okay.
right up front.
Yeah.
That's a different topic in some ways. It's related. The whole why questions, we just sort of float over those and think of in terms of death and suffering, all of the topics under that, more in terms of these are the results of the fall.
Mm-hmm.
So we're not going to get into why me or any of that.
Right.
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 But I think with suffering, one of the things that I do spend a little bit of time on in class is some of the questions surrounding, and it's related to death, the medicalization of suffering.
Okay, yeah.
Like you said, the industry. And there's some good books written by physicians who are actually calling into question some of the practices we have with respect to trying to prolong life, which may or may not actually be prolonging life. In many cases, what we're doing is prolonging death. So can you actually live a better life if you don't do that fourth round of chemo? I can almost guarantee you from what I've read that you will. That in some cases, not taking that fourth round of chemo, we'll say, just as an example, you may even live longer than the person that does take it. There was one such study done at Harvard that demonstrated that. So that in itself is interesting. But the question is, again, how do you face death in a realistic way? How do you recognize that sometimes death, where it's connected to disease, is just inevitable? And I'm not saying that's an easy question to answer, but it turns out that Christians are much more likely to prolong death than other folks with extraordinary measures. And I think that's kind of appalling at some level, but I think many think that God's going to make a miracle. That's what they've been told. And so some studies have shown that. Other Christians think that they just need to wait, let God have time to work. And this is in really dire situations.
Yeah.
And I think at the core of it is that we just don't think we ought to suffer, kind of what you said. We don't want pain. Is suffering good? There's some good things about suffering. Paul indicates that suffering produces perseverance, for example. And so biblically even, there's some gain from suffering. The Christian martyrs thought there was some gain in suffering. I'm hesitant to say all suffering is good, but there is something. And I've been reading an older book lately. It's a little devotional book written in about 1923, I think. It's a compilation of authors. So interesting because the whole book is basically reflections on suffering.
Oh, okay.
And the whole theme of every reflection is that God is doing this for your good. He is in this. He is with you, and he's doing this to help you grow stronger in your faith. Man, I don't think that would preach in today's world.
Yeah.
Not in the U.S. anyway.
That's very against what...
It is. It's like, don't make God make him look like he's responsible. It's like, well, he is in control. We're back to that control issue. So, I mean, that's part of it, is just helping people realize. But I do think that, again, in the U.S., people don't think they should have any pain. And I have some people that I know pretty well who are physicians, and they'll tell you that one of the problems with the opioid crisis is that people start taking too many opioids because they think they should have no pain. Well, most people live with some degree of pain, and if they don't, they will. And my own doctor will remind me of that some pain is normal by the time you get to be 65.
It's part of the human experience.
It's not just is.
Something's wrong.
No, there's
in some
just
sense.
Your muscles are going to ache. I mean, we laugh. Some years, probably been in our mid-50s, we went to go help our son rake leaves at their new house. They've just married or something. I don't know what year that was. But we went, they had just a mountain of leaves, and it was crazy. So we spent a whole day raking leaves with them, and we could tell the
I bet you
next
felt
day.
it.
Well, our first house had a mountain of leaves too, and we were 22. I don't think I remember being sore at all. I think we just raked the leaves, went to bed, got up the next morning, good to
Moved
go.
on. Yeah.
Yeah. So no, it's some pain though. As you get older, is just going to be normal. I think probably, I don't know at what point that starts, but I'm guessing that. I mean, even if you work out at 20, if you really push yourself, you're going to have some pain the next day.
Of course you are. Yeah.
So, and that's normal. And pain doesn't always tell you that something's wrong. Sometimes it just tells you used something really hard and it built some muscle strength, right? Or you should be using it more, so you're building muscle strength, right? Well, I wonder if I'll say mental or spiritual pain isn't like that as well. The Bible seems to indicate that it is. Paul talks about his sufferings all the time. Jesus is in this world, you will suffer. So it's kind of like, but again, is anybody preaching on that? Not enough.
It's more of keep us comfortable, keep it safe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
God will take care of you. He'll be, everything's going to turn out okay.
Sure.
Don't worry about it. That's prosperity gospel. It's implicit, but you might as well be telling them they'll get a motorhome next week because it's not really quite true.
Okay.
I mean, one of the options my students get to do in Systematic 2 is read the book Silence or watch the movie.
Okay.
That's severe persecution.
Yeah.
And yet, is God there? Is he with those people in their persecution? And is he using that for some ultimate good, the good of the kingdom? That's Romans 8:28. It's not your personal good. It's the ultimate good of his people, plural. It really does. It's a blanket on all suffering that somehow, if you can't say that God's in control of suffering, who is?
In some ways, it's like you can't
We talk
get
about
away from that problem of evil then.
Right,
Like it goes to this problem of evil
does.
question.
And I don't deal with that in
Yeah.
class. I know all the standard answers to that,
Yeah.
including the atheist's answer, or the best atheist I've ever read. But I think that stepping back and saying, well, God's out there somewhere, but he's not here right now. Is that what you want to say? Or do you want to say that when a sparrow falls from a tree, God is with that sparrow? Not a sparrow can fall from the tree apart from, this is the typical translation, the will of your Father in heaven. Now, we can talk all day about God's permissive will, his active will, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But that text actually in the Greek says, not a sparrow can fall from a tree apart from your Father in heaven. In other words, whatever's happening there, God is right there with that sparrow. He isn't necessarily causing the fall, but he is right there.
So in some ways, we'll get to funerals. Here's the transition. Right?
We got off
we
the
all
track,
die.
kind of, yep.
That's all right. We all die.
Uh-huh.
Suffering is definitely part of the human experience.
It is. Not just Christians.
Yeah.
And so even the question of when Christians seem to not want to suffer or seem to think they don't need to suffer or shouldn't suffer, why? You're a human. You're going to suffer. And you're also going to suffer almost certainly for the sake of being in Christ. So we suffer as Christians and we suffer as humans.
So it's somewhat it's like especially part of a Christian life is the suffering. And there's there's lessons in there. There's lessons that we
I think
can
what we
learn
do with
amidst
the
the
suffering is very important.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right.
But again, suffering for the sake of Christ, Christians will do that. But all humans suffer. So what is it about Christians that's different in how we approach our suffering versus, or do we just look like every other human? Do we look like how culture approaches suffering?
Well, maybe it goes toward, I'm going to put grief and suffering together because we're going to land on the funeral topic, right? So, if you grieve, but you grieve with hope, maybe you suffer and you suffer with hope. the
Yeah.
same time, even if it doesn't feel like there's
Yeah.
hope.
But what is the hope when you're suffering?
It could be it depends on the suffering, right? So
Yeah.
the suffering, I talked to a student who was going into seminary, was a nurse at the time. And part of the reason why they were going into work in pastoral care was because they saw such poor bedside
Yeah.
manner by clergy who were actually kind of feeding into that hope of the healing versus a hope of a resurrection. She said to me, what people need is hope in the resurrection at some point. If they're dying,
Yeah.
if they're actively dying, medically actively dying, right? I know we're all dying, right?
Right. No, I understand. Yeah,
Yeah.
right. The difference. So I think part of it, when you think about it that way, I think that's I think that's really important. What your friend, the nurse, was saying, or
Yeah.
it was a student.
Yeah,
you said?
they became a student, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I think that's really important. And I think the hope when you're suffering is certainly pointed toward the resurrection, that Christ, Hebrews says that Christ has suffered in every way as we did. And that's why he can go to the Father on our behalf. We already have that mediator, right? So all of that gets wrapped into this course as well. So Christ is that ultimate hope. He's currently mediating for us with the Father. And we have the presence, the comforting, advocating presence of the Holy Spirit with us now. So the hope is always future. So future is that, the resurrection. But now, right now, Christ is with the Father, advocating on our behalf. And the Spirit is even praying for us in words that we can't express. If we can't pray, the Spirit will pray. And frankly, so should the church. That's why prayer in the church is so important. That's why congregational prayer is so important. Because sometimes when suffering is really severe, at least for me, there's been times I can't pray. I have nothing to say to God. I'm unhappy. I don't like what just happened. I want to reverse it. I want to go back to before and not live in the pain of this.
Yeah.
And right then, I don't necessarily need that resurrection hope, as I need assurance of his presence now, here and now, because he is there. The Spirit is with us at all times and in all places. We don't have to ask for it. We just have to be aware of it. And Christ is always with the Father, representing us, reminding us that he's already conquered all of this. And so in suffering, probably one of our best prayers is something, again, a lot of people don't want to pray because they like their life here. Lord Jesus, come quickly. This is not the way you intended it to be. This isn't what you wanted. And yet this is what we have because of our free will back in the garden.
You want to so you said, obviously, Jesus suffered. I mean, he even, if we look at the Garden of Gethsemane and his prayer about suffering, but it was a submission to will.
He does.
It was a.
If it be your will, let this cup pass from me. It's not. Would you just take this away now? Because I'm really tired of this.
These disciples are asleep.
Yeah, they're lame. My friends have all, or read the lament psalms. My friends have all left me. I have no one, but I have you. Lament psalms, they're not prayers of doubt. They're prayers of faith, or they wouldn't be praying.
So it's not a minimizing of someone's suffering or a minimizing of someone's
not at all.
tragedy. It's entering into that and breathing out. It's very emotional. Yes,
it is.
Yeah.
And it's not a false promise either that somehow, you're going to get better, or it's sort of a day-to-day journey with the person who's suffering, whether it's because they've lost dear ones in death, or whether they're personally suffering in a physical way or a mental way. Mental illness can be worse than physical illness. Or maybe they're just spiritually struggling with God because of the other suffering in their life. So what do they need? They need to hear that God is with them. He is the one who is able to do exceedingly more than you could ask or imagine. Now we are in Ephesians again.
There we go.
And And what does that mean? Does that mean that he will do that? Well, Jesus knew that God could send a legion of angels.
Mm-hmm.
He says as much when Peter cuts off the ear of the
Sure.
soldier. But he says, if it be your will. So what changes in our heads when instead of saying, you just have to heal Grandma, you just have to heal my son, Lord, we know you can, and we just ask you to do that now.
Mm-hmm.
How is that different than, Lord, this is a serious situation. You know that better than we do. And we ask that if it is your will, you would heal Grandma.
This comes back to your dying every night.
Yeah.
Of an active release.
It
of,
is. But
of
we're not
submission.
trained to that. And
No.
that's what part of the goal of the course is, what does it look like if our practices form us to just think in that way, that everything that happens, the good, the bad, absolutely everything is sort of recognized as being in God's control, part of his perfect will that will eventually land us in a new heavens and new earth. Even if we see through a glass darkly now, not only understanding God, but his ways.
So my real pragmatic question is okay, well, how should we do a funeral?
Yeah,
and
right.
in some ways, and to the pastors who are listening, Mary and I have heard you talking. We've met you. We know that you like to do funerals more than weddings.
Yeah, that's right. They do.
and I think as we reflect on this, we're preparing for our conversation. It's about that sense of clarity. People are paying attention at a funeral
They are.
in a way that they aren't at a wedding, which maybe goes to that sober-minded clarity that this whole habit of dying and rising gives us. But I guess what I'm hearing is, okay, we can go through here's some tips, here's some how-tos. But in some ways, it's preparing them for that moment over the course of their whole life.
Yeah.
And having a wholly different attitude and embrace of the experience of death and suffering in someone's life, so that by the time you get to the funeral, this has been practiced.
It has.
It's been practiced.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right, Aaron. That would be what I would hope.
Yeah. So funerals, I mean, and you said, you pull in active pastors to talk about what it's like to lead funerals. And,
I do. They're really good, by the way.
Yeah. Is there something we should know about funerals? What makes a really, I'll say, good funeral? I know everyone's life is different and different traditions and everything, but I'm curious, what that conversation looks like in your classroom about what makes a good funeral, or what people should know.
Yeah, the general, the pastors that I go to are the pastors at my church, and it's Peter Yonker and our music minister Larry Visser, and they say that the funeral should be a parabola where you begin sort of neutral-ish, like maybe with a praise song of some sort, then you dip down into mourning.
You go into it.
Yeah, and really that might be songs, it might be readings, it could be anything, but you want to dip down into mourning and then sort of come back up and end on resurrection hope, right? And the point is that people don't want to grieve. People want to push it aside. People want to push bodies aside. They want to push everything about the funeral aside. They just don't want to deal with it. And that's actually really psychologically very harmful. And I think I mentioned to you earlier, there's a condition called complicated grief, which is a condition where people have not grieved properly. They've kind of stuffed it away and haven't really dealt with it. And it can end up coming out in ways that it shouldn't. The grief is going to manifest itself one way or another, sooner or later. And so you should figure out how. One person talks about grief as work. I read one person who talks about it as trying to walk through sand up to your knees with 100 pounds on your back. That's the work of grief. And I don't think about American culture, the church unfortunately isn't too different in this particular case. We don't want to work at grief.
We just
And
want it to go away.
We want it to go away.
Yeah.
Just like pain.
Yeah.
We want it to go away. And we may want to blame somebody else for it, for all that matters.
Mm-hmm.
And so how can funerals not only assist people to grieve, but actually encourage them to do so? And so one of the things I like to think about with that sort of work of grief is how does the practice, this ongoing recognition of dying, help us be able to face death, our own or somebody we love, better, and really actively participate in that work of grief?
Mm-hmm.
And I like to say sometimes that if you think about, we're in Lent right now,
Mm-hmm.
if you think about Easter, Holy Week, and particularly Good Friday and that weekend, Good Friday is when Jesus dies, and everybody's really sad. And most of us like to just jump to Easter. And in funerals, we do too. We might be sad the day of, but by the time we get to the funeral, we just want Easter. We want to hear about Easter.
Mm-hmm.
That's okay, but Holy Saturday is in there. How do you think the disciples felt on Holy Saturday?
There's a sitting with it.
There is. That's the work, right? They only did it for a day. Most of us need way more than a day when it's for somebody that we love. I mean, it might be if it's somebody we know but aren't particularly close to, that's obviously different. But when this is your family member or a close friend, you need to take that time to mourn that loss, because it is a loss. I mean, okay, they're with the Lord, and here you are. How does that feel?
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't feel good.
Mm-mm.
Sometimes if the person, even a young person, has been suffering with cancer or I'll just say usually it's something like cancer, right? But it can be other diseases or an accident. But I'll just say a suffering situation where somebody didn't immediately die, but either suffered after an accident for a good length of time or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's easier to sort of feel relief because you've been grieving. My dad had dementia, and for about the last 4 years he was alive, he was a steady decline. The first 11 years were not great, but he wasn't in terrible shape.
Mm-hmm.
But the last 4 years were pretty... Well, his death, I love my dad. I'd love him back. But the dad that died was not the dad that I knew most of my life.
You had been experiencing loss along the way.
All along,
Yes.
right? I mean, I didn't very often leave the center over at the place where he stayed with his dementia the last 4 years without crying.
Mm-hmm.
Because, and he ended up in nursing care. And, you know, it was torture in some ways to go up there and know that I'm not going to really see the dad that I used to love having theological conversations with and whatnot, that he was still my dad, and he wasn't really suffering, honestly. He wasn't. But all of us were. And so there was a sense of relief with that, and release even, that he's finally gone to be with the Lord. And that is, in fact, much better, as Paul says.
But even in that situation, your parabola where it goes down,
It does.
You're still saying,
We
I'm going to guess, you still in that service, you went down.
Absolutely
into the
did.
grief.
Yeah. And actually we didn't so much because, well, we did, but that was during COVID, unfortunately.
That's a whole
So
nother
we had a
story.
graveside service, but it did have a mini parabola.
Yeah.
There was plenty of mourning there.
Yeah.
But I think what pastors need to keep in mind is however you name your service, whatever family want, I would do my best. And again, I'm a theologian. I'm not a pastor. And I would probably just offend people. But as pastors, you guys know how to do this better than I ever would. Help encourage the family to take time to grieve, to take time at that funeral. They maybe don't want to have those sad things. No, I don't want this. This is going to be a celebration. We're going to just enjoy my mom as she was. It's like, I get that. I do. But doesn't it hurt?
Mm-hmm.
Take time to allow it to hurt. Take time to feel the loss.
Which takes courage.
It does.
It takes courage.
Yeah. And I think it's just so important overall, because there are emotions involved. And if you don't deal with your emotions, as a psychologist that I know well said to me, they're going to come out sideways.
Mm-hmm. If there's a one thing that people could take away, whether they're pastors or curious listeners, what's the thing they should remember about this whole topic of like death and suffering and grieving and these really heavy topics? Like what do they need to know?
I think that for Christians, probably if I could sum up everything, it would be that death and suffering are part of life. And we shouldn't try to minimize that.
Mm-hmm.
We need to learn to face it. We need to learn to grieve, but recognize that through all of this, whether suffering or death, our grief always has that future outlook of hope because of Christ. So God is with us, and we have hope for the future because of Christ's work on our behalf.
And we're able to have that hope even amidst the suffering. It's not that we have to minimize one in order to have the other.
No.
They're together.
They're together, and God is with us in that suffering. Yep.
Yeah. So, Mary, thanks for having this conversation. I really was looking forward to talking about death. My last question I always like to ask guests is, what gives you hope? Which maybe has been the whole topic of our conversation, but I'll re-ask it again, right?
Yeah.
In your situation, and what you're facing, like, what gives you hope?
Yeah. It is interesting. I'm just looking back or thinking back to that first question you asked, how did I get into this?
Yeah.
And in my doctoral program, which is quite a long time ago now, I actually did some work on hope as a virtue. From the Roman Catholic perspective, it's one of the 3 theological virtues. And I think that maybe was a seed that was planted to think more about this, because I do also, I mean, yes, I think about death, but I like to think about hope. But what gives me hope is what Christ did for us. I just, if I look at any given situation, to know that even in the worst of circumstances, God is right there with me. So that when I'm suffering, when I'm at my wit's end because I don't even have words to say to him, I can always pray the Lord's Prayer. And I can always ask the church to pray for me, and they will. And that ultimately I can look to Christ, and this is Calvin's words, as medicine for my wounds and comfort for my dread. So I can look at myself, but there's not going to be many resources there. And
So you're never alone.
I'm never alone because I have the Holy Spirit in me, leading, guiding, correcting, changing, hopefully, over time.
And that's present in all parts of the parabola.
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thanks, Mary.
Yeah. Thank you, Aaron.
Yep.
Been fun.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening to the Forum Podcast. To learn more, go to theforum.calvinseminary.edu.